My name is Monica Kretschmer, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network, Woman of Inspiration Awards, and this is the Woman of Inspiration podcast, where we speak with women who lead, inspire, and motivate. These are women that blaze the road less traveled and inspire others to dream big. Now, I have a very special guest with me today. She is the founder of AM360 Sphere Inc., Making Fashion. Hello, Amelie Mongrain. It's such a pleasure to have you on our Woman of Inspiration podcast today. You are also one of our 100 Woman of Inspiration book contributors. Super excited to tell your story today.
Thank you, Monica. It's my pleasure to be with you. I'm super excited.
Well, we're super excited to have you. And of course, you are in the fashion capital city of Canada in Montreal. And so you've got an incredible story. Of course, you've traveled abroad for 25 years and finally came back to Canada and called Montreal your home, which is no surprise considering the industry you were in. It's a perfect fit. So let's just jump in, Amelie. I would love to share with the listeners and viewers today, where did your story start? I mean, how did you end up working abroad?
Thanks. Yeah, and it's I like the way that you introduced that, because I was in Shanghai, which is a very happening city in fashion, and came to Montreal 25 years later. Listen, I always like to open up my story by literally my mother told me to get a job. So if I back up a little bit, I'm from Northern Ontario, Franco-Ontarian, and basically my parents were merchant in textiles and ribbons and so forth. And basically they asked me to take over the business. And I had bigger dreams than that, than taking over a small business and so forth. So I've decided to do my studies in fashion in Montreal. So I left the hometown and went all the way to Montreal. And I thought that would be my pit stop, in the sense that I'm going to start there and see where it brings me. But surely my mother told me, well, you have the summer to find a job, because then you're coming back. And on that same day that I got that call, I went to, by pure hazard, actually, I went to the school where I just graduated 2 days prior, and I put my resume on top of a pile, and a gentleman came back and just grabbed my resume, and he goes, oh, you've been an exchange student in Turkey? And I said, yes. He goes, what do you think of China? I said, I'm sure I would love it. He goes, great answer. And that day he printed out the contract in front of me, and I was sent to China, Shanghai, to be a junior fashion design teacher. And that's how I got there. Really, it was, this is the best way that I can really share this experience. But for me, it was not even questioning myself. China, Shanghai, sure. So that's how I got into my role of just starting to travel the world, which was something for me that I will cherish, and I owe so much to that opportunity, actually.
Well, I find this really interesting because it is like right now we're doing the interview, it's grad season. And so as lots of the graduating students are now going, the world is my oyster. What you've really proved is that it is your oyster, and you've just got to get a hold of those opportunities and jump and just say yes. So I guess, what I want to ask you is, you said yes, there was no hesitation. Did you have to think about it? Did you have to say, let me consult with my family, my support network? Or did you just get this overwhelming kind of just message, whether it be the universe that said, just do it? Don't even waste one more minute. Just say yes and figure it out later.
Yeah, well, you'll get to know me more and more. Definitely, I just said yes. I didn't even think twice, didn't even think of calling anyone. I took the contract, went home, and I listened. Yeah, why not? And I've signed and I just brought it back in. To me, it was just like, whoa, this is insane. But at the same time, so exciting. And then I did do that call home and say, hey, I found a job. And to their surprise, they were quite shocked that I was leaving within 10 days. Because, you have to get the visa, and I just said yes to that. But, when you're 22 years old, you only have a suitcase, you don't have attachment or whatsoever. Family is everything for me, but at the same time, the world is in front of you. So to me, it was just such a opportunity that I could not even imagining of saying no to. For me, no does not exist in that vocabulary. It's like, yes, and let's see what happens when I get there. But I will tell you, the shock when I landed in Shanghai in 1996, first of all, the Pudong airport was not built, they were building it. So it was quite simple, small airport. And the whole city was in construction. So we had 18% of the world's crane in Shanghai. So it was not a beautiful city. And I had in my mind that I was going to go and teach fashion design in a beautiful pagoda, that you see in those storybooks. But I was literally shocked and into, no, this is cement building, and that's how you start. So it was quite a big shock. But at the same time, I was not the only one. I walked into a facility where was other Canadians, teaching other specialties, and we just became a family. And we were all foreigners in a very big city that was just starting to evolve.
Very cool. And I have to say, the language barrier would be the first thing that comes to mind. You're French Canadian, going to Shanghai, and we always, we have the opportunity to speak with foreigners that immigrate to Canada. But what was that like for you going to Shanghai and not speaking the language? How hard was that for you?
Yeah, well, so, there's different way of looking at things. Definitely the language was a barrier, because there's nothing that I could compare to. It's not like going to Italy and saying, oh, it sounds a bit like there's a few French words that I can pick up on or whatsoever. So for sure, you get into a place that you have no references or so forth. So I've always said to many people, you have good China Day and you have bad China Day. And the good is when you try to figure out and you laugh with people around you. And the bad ones are just when you just like, wow, I just want to buy milk without being at an event, right? And this is part of understanding that you are not home in your comfort zone. You're constantly in a challenge zone at all time at the right beginning, because everything is so different around you. And it's hard sometimes to even understand, right? Who am I to say that I'm in the right mind when you're somewhere else where their right mind is something, other references? So let me tell you, it was a lot of, first of all, learning about myself as a person, and it's okay to be alone so it was a lot of that, because you feel alone at all time. You are very different from the rest. And so in that sense, and even today, because I cannot say I'm a fluent speaker in Mandarin, that's for sure. But let me tell you, I speak the culture. That's what I can say. I speak the culture. I feel I was able to really get into how it is to be in a country that is not yours, and also that you cannot really adopt. You're still a guest, because there's different countries that are limited in terms of what you can do and not. but at the same time saying, okay, this is where I'm going to establish myself and build my business. And that's what I've done, which for me, I owe everything to Shanghai, because how Shanghai evolved, I did the same thing. I got there at 22 years old, and by the time I got out, I have 24 years of experience. I have a business under my belt, and full of stories to share, right?
Just a few stories to share, Emily. Like, I'm thinking of, when you go for these work trips, these contracts are usually for a year or 2 years, possibly 3 years. But what was it that really kept you there? 25 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So, you started a business there, you became fluent enough to actually, integrate yourself into the culture and speak the language with the people and make friends. But what was there ever a thought that crossed your mind that said, I'm never coming home?
Well, maybe if it was not for COVID, we would not have that type of conversation. But I was only going to Shanghai for 1 year. My contract was 1 year. And then you extend that contract and you go on and so forth. I have a character that likes to learn as I work. So it's always hands-on approach, working with everybody. I don't take the time to think more. Usually I will act upon. So the way that I can mostly explain is that I've always said the day that my life, it becomes mundane and the same, I will pick up my bags and go back home. But it never was as such. And there was always new ways of learning, places to visit, factories to get into and to learn from them. And then you build really a network of people. I can tell you today that anywhere I want to travel in the world, I have someone I can call. And that's the beauty of being a person of the world. And that's what I like to say, because you don't have barriers of saying, oh, you're not Canadian, or, oh, you're just saying, hey, you're a person like me. And where do you originally come from? So that was my sentence. I would say that to local Chinese, and they thought it was very funny, and I would start laughing. I would ask them, so where do you originally come from? But often they come from another province in China. So that would put a big smile on them, and we would just engage in something. And I think that I'm a very curious person. And all of that just kept me on going there, and on staying there, not going there, but staying there. But by moving around, I was always returning to Shanghai, but I would travel China and Asia, and always looking on what are the things in front of you.
Very exciting. That is quite a journey and so much experience. I want to talk a little bit about the business that you managed to build. Of course, you were born and raised in Canada, with parents in the textile industry. Tassels and fringe and ribbons and, like all of my favorite things. There's so much creativity there. But how did you actually, and you went to teach, so maybe connect the dots to our listener into the business that you created and how you've become such an industry expert.
Thank you. Yes. So by entering my career with teaching before even experience, got me to meet different types of companies, and understanding that there's a big world of fashion. And fashion, it's far from being glamorous. It's a lot of hard work, and it's textiles, and it's factories and cutting machine and so forth. So I've done a lot of visit with my students. We would go and visit places and so forth. And you make a lot of connection. And after a few years, I said to myself, I feel like I want to be part of the making of, and making of fashion is one of the such a beautiful thing, because you start with nothing and you finish with a garment. And these are all people working at that, which my mother's a seamstress, and still today at 80 years old, she's still doing wedding gowns and stuff like that. But it's something that is there, it's an art. But when you do it in an industry, that's another, it's amazing to see lines of sewing machine and people working and the chains and so forth. So of course, again, I was very, very much intrigued. And I was sitting at a judge table. I was a guest judge at a competition. And we had Italians sitting beside me, and they asked me, why don't you come and work for us and set up the product development department in our company? And I basically again said, sure, yes. And I joined them for about 2 years, where I've really learned what is a factory. So I was working, it was a Italian's men's suit factory. And so I learned how to tailor suits, men's suits. And I was really on the floor with the old Italians and the Chinese, and it was such a beautiful mix. And I fell in love with manufacturing there. I'm just like, okay, I really, really like that. And, one thing brings you to another. Meet someone else that was looking for somebody to take care of his production in China, and it was in men's suiting. And so basically, we had a business dinner, and then he asked me, well, show me what you can do in a factory. The typical thing, huh? And then saying, show me what you can do. So I said, sure, let's go. And we flew to a factory, and basically I walked the line, and I felt very comfortable. And so he said, okay, I have 10,000 suits to make. I don't want to hire you. You'll have a commission, but I don't need to take care of it. And I said, okay, once again, I'm always, okay. So came home and saying, okay, so I've got this order of 10,000 suits, and I need to ship that to the US, and I need to get it done. And so I started my business with that in 2004 with a PO of 10,000 suits. And let me tell you, I was sleeping in that factory until I was doing these suits. And it was quite challenging, but so many good stories there. But to make it very short, what happened is that within 6 months, we were 6. I had already 5 employees, and this was happening. Registered the company in Shanghai. I was a WOFI, a foreign wholly owned company, and so I was making garments for the Americas and specializing in menswear, and that's how I started the business, really. And then you learn on how to. It's not just making the garment. You need to learn what is the packaging, how do you export garments, shipment, and all of that. So with my little fashion design diploma, I had to learn. So the first 5 years, it was a business course that I've taught myself, right? Because you want to succeed, and see, in my book, failure does not exist, right? So there's no failure, but there's a lot of obstacles and challenges, and picking yourself back up and trying another angle. And that's how I got to learn the fashion business, making fashion, but in a business way. And again, I feel lucky that I've met somebody that trusted me with that, and then said, okay, I'm not going to do anything more than giving you orders. But you need to set up what needs to be set up for you to function within. So you learn how to calculate what are the margin, and And you do all this, you do mistakes, you lose on some orders, you gain on some other orders, and we just built a beautiful company like that. Yeah.
Fascinating. I'm almost like, when I think about what it is that you were doing there within the manufacturing, you were almost like, I think of building a house, or, a symphony director, kind of even a mix of the two. The symphony is your team on the front lines sewing, because you have to have that leadership ability for them to support you, especially if they see you working hard and being a part of the team. So, how has, you talk about the yes, and you talk about, these opportunities that you're like, yes, I'm just going to figure it out, do it. So how has that leadership really helped you sort of navigate and really elevate your business to a whole new level? Because I can see opportunities that really, you didn't know the answers to all those questions, but yes, you said, yes, I'll figure it out. And that's one of the things that I find is as a barrier for women, is they wait to have all the answers. They don't bother taking that leap. And I love your yes, because you're like, yes, I'll figure it out. So is that the secret to success?
You know what? I'll tell you, yes. No, really, because what I truly believe, we have the answers within. We heard that before, but we truly do have them. But you might need triggers, and you might need a few paths. You might not have the answers of a year down the road, but you have enough yes answers in you to start. Right? So, and often we are our biggest blockers of our path, right? And it's normal. We're all, of course, built differently, but also there's that safety blanket that is hard to test. Where is enough, and where can I just go and try? But definitely, to me, success is it's about being positive and saying yes. Let me study, or let me see. But if you say, oh, no, then already you're blocking, you're not letting people in, right? So to me, the yes is really important, really, really important. And if you say no, you need to challenge yourself. And why is that? Why is it a no? Because today I've learned to say no also. And no, because you need to be able to say, I could, but right now my focus needs to be elsewhere. But when you're young, the no's should be less than the yes, right? In my mind, this is how it should be to be able to evolve, to move on. You should have more yes than no's at a young stage, while at the beginning of your career, I would say. And then as you go, as you gain some wisdom, because we all gain wisdom, no matter what, then you can say, okay, I say yes for what reason? What does, and where do I need to focus, and so forth. Yeah.
So let me ask you something. When you were 12 years old, if you look back, if you can picture where you were at 12, what did you want to be when you grew up? Is that in line with where you are right now?
No, I wanted to be an actress. And it's so funny because, of course, right now I feel very comfortable because you're a very warm person and we're talking together, but I don't like to be on the stage. I love the backstage. And if whatever I work, I'm always backstage, or if we're doing something on a computer, it's the back end of things, how it works. I like to build and things like that. So I always dream to be on that stage, but that's not me. I realize that today it's like I still am so much better organizing and getting things out there. So it always makes me smile that I wanted to be that actress, and I did a summer, theater, and we did, but it's something that I very quickly forgot about, and I would not even think twice, even thinking of going back to that.
Well, it's really interesting because you're building another stage. You're building, a stage for business, which is a whole new level of a spotlight. And, I think right now it's even more important for women like yourself to be in the spotlight on the whatever we call stage, to share the journey like you're doing right now. Because look at how many women that you're impacting by sharing your journey and just your zest for learning and the ability to embrace opportunities. So this is a little bit different stage that we have you on today, Amelie, but I definitely feel that you're very comfortable in this stage.
Thank you.
But that is a barrier for most women. And so, how does it feel to be, recognized now for all of these accomplishments, standing into the spotlight now, not being familiar in that? How does it feel to be now in the spotlight?
Huh. You know what? I think I'm super, super grateful, actually. And I feel that, oh, I made something. So to me, it's like, wow, accomplished. It's accomplishment that I feel. For a long time, I'm not very tall woman working in the backstage or back end or whatsoever. I had to often show what I could do. And I still believe that I need to show what I am able to. And today I feel I don't have to do that anymore. I've gained that space. And not as much as I gained that, I feel that I own it. I own that, oh yeah, I do have 25 years of experience. No one can take that away from me. Like, they can take a lot of things from me, but not my experience, because it belongs to me and I own that. And once I understood that, I was just like, "Whew, okay, sounds good." So I'll take that title. I'll take that 25 years experience with open arms. I don't need to say, "Oh, I've been around the block." No, it's like, I have 25 years of experience, and that's how I did it, which is my story, and it's really, really coming from the inner and not from the outside.
Mhm. And so, how can we encourage more women, do you believe, to sort of step into their spotlight, to own their worth, and really celebrate their successes? How do you think that's possible? If you were to, share with our listeners, you know, that are having a hard time with that right now, what would you tell them?
Well, believe in yourself. That's a hard one, but that's the first step. It's to believe you can do something. So believing in yourself is so important to start.
Mm.
If and that can take a bit of time, but as you go and take the chance, taking risk is very important also.
Mm.
You can start small, but without taking a risk, you cannot see if you are advancing or you didn't take the right choice at that time or whatsoever. So believing in yourself, take that risk and see where it takes you.
Mm.
Be open. And you need to be open to the world. And I like to say the world because there is a world out there, but be open to it. And by being open, you are not putting some fences,
Mm.
right? And I think that's women still today, we are still, I'm not allowed. Oh, what will they say? It's
Mm.
all of that image that of insecurity. But if you put that aside and say, no, I believe I'm able to, I will stand up, I will go forward, I will not wait for someone to come and get me. And these are all the things that will really open the door, because opportunities are all around us.
Mm.
So you need to listen and to feel. Your gut and your intuition are so important. And us women, we have a lot of it, because if you're a mother, it comes naturally, intuition. Well, you use that intuitive part of you and listen for those bells and grab them. And that's when I say, when everything is within you, it's that gut feeling, intuition, and going forward. And you, of course, you can look back, but what's done is done. So doesn't matter. It's done. So you're going to learn from it. You leave it behind and you go forward. So it's as you know, it's easy to say. I know it's hard to practice, but it's also good to try, right?
And so I think you almost answered my question, but I just want to dive in there a little bit more. Is you're very positive and you embrace opportunity, but what happens? How do you get over the roadblocks and challenges? How do you personally face that as such an optimistic person? What does that look like for you?
Well, you know, when you do face challenges, which, believe me, there's been a lot of challenges. It's how you look at it, right? It's, what is the worst that can happen?
Mm.
And what is a failure to my failure looks like? And how can I continue, or do I stop? And then you're able to make a decision or not. But you need to move. There's no way, you cannot not move. So you have to move forward, but moving forward may be to put a halt to things and say, okay, it's time for me to get back, or it's time to me to stop working with this manufacturer, these companies, or this relationship is not good for me, for my going forward. So you will make decision based on what is, when I've learned to look at what is my the worst scenario, what happens, what's the worst, and if you can find that answer and you say, okay, the worst is that I don't want to go there, but knowing that I'll be able to fix that challenge, that problem. Because there's no, if you ask somebody what is your best moment and your worst moment of your life, and you put a straight line and you put the points from the bottom, it's never everything is okay. It's always ups and downs, and then sometimes and then you go up, up, up. So we go through challenges all through our life, right? Even as an infant coming out of the womb. But what do you do when you get roadblocks like that, or you get crazy stories that can happen? About image coming into my mind. You have that moment of panic for sure, but at the same time, you can only control what you can control. When it's out of your hand, there's nothing that can be done. So what you can control, these are the decisions you can make, and you can decide to say, to look forward in terms of, I'm able to tackle those two things, and let's see what happens. And the last thing that I would share with all of you on that, it's never to bottle things up. You need to have that person or that organization, if it's an organization, that you're able to consult. You're able to, empty your bag, right? So sometimes it's only to hear your voice saying it out loud, and you say, oh, it's on that of an issue now that I'm saying it out loud. But if you stay in your mind, then this becomes often bigger situation than the reality is. So speaking to having a support group, because you learn as an expat, you always have a support group, right? If you're from you're in your own country, often it's your family, right? But often also you will find people that are alike and you can trust. So support groups are very, very important, which I think that's what you're doing too.
Well, and thank you. That was, that's one of my questions that I really love to dive into is, as you know, support hers, and champions for women is really important to us. So I guess my question to you now is, what does that support network look like to you? Who are your support hers that have helped champion you?
Oh, I think I do have a very big support group. And the way that I see that it's when you bring something to someone and you're able to express what you are looking at and what you thrive to be or whatsoever. Nonetheless, people will support you. The more you talk, the more you express yourself, then you will get a support that comes with that. If you are being negative and whatsoever, then it's going to be harder to get support. So there's this that I just wanted to put out there. But I will tell you, I'm the third one in my family, so I've got two older sisters. So there are my big cheerleaders for sure. And and the family had always been there from far, but it's also in business. I have clients that are friends and they believe in me and they support my decision and often are there to even guarantee that I'm able to achieve what I want to achieve and set to achieve. So we built our support group, but we need to look who's around me, who's around you, I mean. And one thing that I think today, because I've been working in a men's world a lot. You would think fashion, there's a lot of women, but there's a lot of men also that are doing the mass production or whatsoever. And at one point, I did not see that I needed women's support. So, but I became this character of, I was a little man finally. I was not in touch with my feminine side. And it's been about 10 years that I realized that in my life, I've missed that woman's support and touch. And I lost that. Who was I as a woman? Not as, okay, I'm putting my pants on and I'm doing this, taking decision. And there's other ways of doing all of that. And once I've realized that, I started to be attracted to women's entrepreneur and looking on how they succeeded. And then spokesperson that would go and tell their stories and how they got there. And that was a lot of interesting attraction. And once you're attracted to something, then you realize that you're not alone and you start to surround yourself by these women. And then all of a sudden there's an exchange that happens. And I always believe support goes two-way, right? You get your support, but as a person, you give also support often because it's hard to just do it one way. You will often not feel as complete if it does not happen the two ways. I'm not too sure if I'm answering the question.
No,
but
I think you answered it well. It's just, it's interesting that you were in such a male dominated industry. So you adopted those traits and you put on this armor that really was, your masculine, you stepped into your masculine instead of your feminine. And so it is really beautiful seeing the transformation that, you've now been able to step into your feminine leadership power, because it is definitely a leadership power that, we are, we have really risen through COVID, through that feminine leadership, really. But no, you've answered that about the support hers and how important it is to have your circle of influence around you at all times, for sure. I do want to talk about, this is the Woman of Inspiration podcast. Of course, you're very motivated, self-starter, but is there a woman of inspiration that inspires you? Who would that woman be?
Oh, there's so many. Woman of inspiring that would inspire me. It's such a hard thing to answer because I'm surrounded by them, and so that's why it's very hard for me to name drop some, right? But if I will take my niece. And the reason that I'm choosing Kevin Smith is she's been told she's a mini me. But for me, she's much more than that. And she is not mini me. She has this way of tackling the world in such a way that I was not looking at the same angle. And today's world, being 25 years old, what does it mean? And trying to build your path and so forth. And she's 25 years old, but since 23, she has her own business. And she made the decision that I can make it this way. I am not choosing the path of getting experience from bigger company. I'm going to choose the path in creating my work and traveling the world by doing that. So she is a ball of energy and also a person that is thinking outside the box. Has not been done, but I'm sure I'll be able to make it happen, right? Which I find that we need that new generation coming in with those outside of the box models.
And so would you say that your woman of inspiration definition would encompass the traits that your niece has? And if you were to say a woman of inspiration to me is, how would you answer that?
A woman of inspiration is a woman that is her true self and has no shame in showing who she is. To me, that's a woman of inspiration.
Beautiful. Well, I love the fact that you are a woman of inspiration. You have gone out and created a really unique niche for yourself. And I still think back to the beginning of the story for the listeners that are, going back to just, putting your resume on the top of the pile and just saying yes. You have led your entire life in your career with saying yes to opportunities, and that has provided you the ability to stand in and carve new paths, but also inspire others to do the same. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm really looking forward to having you part of the 100 Women of Inspiration book. How can people get a hold of you, Amelie, if they're looking to learn more about what it is that you're doing with Making Fashion and with AM360?
They can reach me by email for sure at any time. That's one good thing. And then on LinkedIn, I'm very present on LinkedIn. And also I do have a website called Making Fashion that is being is going live the 1st of July, which is very exciting for all of us, definitely.
Well, super exciting. We've got lots of great things on the go. And once again, it was such a pleasure to speak with you. I look forward to continuing the conversation. And for those that are listening, step into dreaming big. There are so many opportunities. Just be willing to look around. If you enjoyed the podcast today, I invite you to please share it with somebody that needs to hear, listen to the stories, and be inspired by the women of inspiration that are, paving the way and inspiring others to dream big. So thank you so much, Amelie, for joining us today. And thank you again to our listeners for tuning into the Women of Inspiration podcast.
Thank you.